Welcome back to OpenLine, everyone. We're talking about corporal punishment. Should Tennessee ban corporal punishment for kids with disabilities? That's a bill that is making its way through the legislature, and it brings up all kinds of interesting points of discussion. Just the fact that corporal punishment is still legal in Tennessee, and that many counties, in fact the majority of school districts across the state, still allow corporal punishment. There's some I guess there's some things parents must do before the district is allowed to use corporal punishment, but it's an interesting discussion. Happy to have with us the Executive Director of the ARC of Tennessee, Carrie Hobbs-Guiden. We are still streaming this live on the NewsChannel 5 Facebook page, where Jerry Ann Cooper-Shepard says, can't believe parents are okay with having their disabled kids or any child of theirs spanked. And then many others say, I wish, like Brandy Robertson, I wish our schools would have paddles. So again, this is on Facebook. A lot of people are taking it as a debate about corporal punishment in general, and that's not what your bill is.
Correct.
You're talking just about disabled students.
Correct.
Now, I asked earlier about numbers. What did you find as far as just the number of kids who are paddled or spanked and the number of disabled kids who fall in that?
Right. So again, this data is not all inclusive of the schools in Tennessee. It's just the voluntary data that was reported. And so, and the problem is also that the most recent data that's available is 2013-2014 school year. So there's a lag in the data. But in 2009-2010, 10,870 students in general received corporal punishment, and then 1,500 students with disabilities. So again, you have to look though proportionally that there's not as many students with disabilities in schools. And then I think what was striking though when they looked at these numbers is that in the 2011-2012 school year, the rate of corporal punishment went down for students without disabilities, so it was 8,846 students. So you're looking at almost a 2,000 student decrease, and it went up to 1,939 students with disabilities, so you're looking at 400 more students increase. So there was a 25% increase in the number of students. And then the trend for students without disabilities continued to go down. And so in 2013-2014, there was only 5,800 students that reported as having had corporal punishment used on them. And then for students with disabilities, it was 1,428. So it did go down some, but not as much as students without disabilities. So trying to figure out why students with disabilities, who for a lot of the cases, their behavior is a manifestation of their disability, that corporal punishment is still used for this particular population.
All right, and so you're Executive Director of the ARC Tennessee. What is the ARC?
So the ARC is a statewide advocacy organization for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. We have been in existence here in Tennessee for over 65 years. We have a national organization in Washington, D.C., and then we have 16 local chapters across the state that provide a variety of services and support. So our role as the state chapter is primarily public policy and systems advocacy for people with intellectual developmental disabilities and their families.
And so why did you get involved in this? How concerned are you by the notion that disabled kids would be subjected to corporal punishment?
I think we were very concerned, and I mentioned that we are part of a larger group called the Disability Coalition on Education. And so before we became actively involved in this bill, we talked to other organizations such as Disability Rights Tennessee, which is the protection and advocacy organization for people with disabilities in this state. They're federally mandated. We spoke with the Council on Developmental Disabilities. We spoke with other child advocacy organizations, with other family members who are part of this particular coalition, to sort of get their feedback around whether or not they thought this bill was a good idea. And so we agreed that it was, and once we agreed that this was something that we would support, then the ARC, is sort of the lobbying arm of the Disability Coalition on Education, decided to start working with the bill sponsors and the legislature to see if we could get it passed.
Patty Ognibini, I hope I'm saying your name right, and I bet I'm not. Disabled or not, no problem is solved by paddling. She says that on Facebook, and we're seeing, again, a robust discussion there on Facebook as we stream it live on our Facebook page. Let's go to Trina on line 1. Hello, Trina.
Hi.
Go right ahead.
Oh, hi. Yes, I realize that I'm a transplant from California to Nashville. But my question is this: in California, there's something called a Hughes bill, and that bill helps families of disabled children advocate legally that they can't, be disqualified from different participation things happening as far as because of their behaviors, which may include some acting out. My question is this: is Tennessee without such a disabled clause in the law currently?
What about that?
And I'm not, if you could repeat that one more time, I wasn't quite clear on what the law was in California.
Okay, there is a Hughes bill.
Okay.
And the Hughes bill basically says that certain children may have disabilities that include some behavior acting out. And the primary focus of the bill was, hey, we don't want these kids getting suspended, kicked out of school because of their disability-related behaviors. So that kind of, with California, there's not really this corporal punishment thing. There's just behaviors that might be seen as inappropriate for the classroom or different activities. Is there nothing here in Tennessee that is similar to that, where you can say, hey, my child has a disability, and they're protected from being even spanked or used corporal punishment on? Is there nothing like that here?
Well, there's nothing specific to corporal punishment. There is something that says whether or not a particular behavior is a manifestation of their disability. And so if that is determined to be the case, then they would not necessarily get suspended or detention or certain things like that. Again, corporal punishment, because it's permitted, a parent can opt out. So a parent can always tell a school, whether they allow corporal punishment or not, that they do not want corporal punishment used on their child. I think one of the challenges is parents don't always know that, and so it's a matter of families knowing that corporal punishment can be used in their school system, and if they don't want it used, then to say that that's not appropriate. But in terms of very specific law, like you're speaking of in California, I don't know what the name of it would be here in Tennessee, but I do know that, again, if there is behavior that is directly related to a student's disability, then they are not supposed to be suspended, kicked out of school, those types of things. But it does still happen, and that's why you have organizations like Disability Rights Tennessee, the ARC Tennessee, to work with families if that does occur.
Do you think there are enough protections in Tennessee for disabled students? Do you think, would you like to see more when you start hearing about what's going on in California, or kind of what do you think about the level of protections out there?
I think Tennessee's made a lot of strides in trying to protect students with disabilities, more so than they have in the past. We have one of the strongest laws in the country related to restraint and isolation of students with disabilities and limitations on when that can be done, and that was passed first in 2000, I want to say 2007, 2008, and then we amended it in 2009, 2010 to tighten it up a little bit. And so that part of the way students with disabilities have been dealt with in terms of behavior is really improved. And so I do think that the school systems are really working toward doing the right thing, and it varies so much across the state, it's really just hard to say in general, because one of the things in Tennessee is that it is very unique to each school district. Individual school districts, and a lot of times individual schools, have a lot of control over what goes on in their particular school.
And it's a difficult thing. It is alarming when you see the number of students being paddled overall going down, and yet the number of students with disabilities being paddled going up. Is there frustration or a misunderstanding about how to deal with disabled students, and do you think that is being displayed in some of those numbers?
I think it's possible. I don't want to say anything that's for certain, but I do know that as students with disabilities are included in general education classrooms more frequently, which is a good thing, which is something that of course the advocacy community looks at, general education teachers don't always get the training that they need to support students with disabilities. And so sometimes they're in a situation where they don't know what to do because they haven't had the appropriate training, or school systems don't have enough money to have a special education teacher in the room providing that support for those students. And so a lot of times, fortunately, it comes back to money and what level of support the schools can provide in terms of training and having enough qualified special education teachers to support those general education teachers.
All right, why don't we take a break? If you want to call in, there's the number, 615-737+, 615-737-7587. Should corporal punishment be banned for students with disabilities? That's what we're talking about. Take a break. Be back right after this.